All right, hello, greetings from Wasco Nursery. We're actually not at the nursery. I am standing in my driveway, and I've had a couple people ask me about putting holiday porch pots or holiday planters together. So I thought that we would just take a couple minutes to shoot a video and show you exactly how I do things. A lot of this is just personal preference, and I'm just going to show you what I like to do. But you may have different tastes in terms of colors and ornaments and the type of greenery that you use, and that's fantastic, but I'm just going to kind of show you a few of the basics. As you can see here, we still have, or I still have, my fall stuff in here. So it was a fountain grass and some cabbage and some alyssum. The alyssum was actually still nice and flowering up until about 10 days ago. So we still need to get this stuff out of here. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to keep some of the soil in here and reuse some of that. So just go ahead and get started. The cabbage is still holding in pretty good. I do have a small coral bell plant that I had put in here, which is actually a perennial. So I'm actually going to take that out and save it and go plant it in the ground somewhere, because this, with its little frozen root system, will actually come back next year. So I'm going to set that aside. What I'm doing right now is just chopping up some of these larger, sort of semi-frozen clumps of soil, just to be able to reuse some of this for some of our branches along the edges. What I like to use for really holding the majority of the branches in place is a floral foam called Oasis. There's actually a couple different brands. Oasis is technically a brand. So we're going to use some of that. So I'm going to create a little pocket here in the middle, get rid of some of this root system, and move some of the soil out to the sides, because that will still work well for holding some of our evergreen boughs and stems in place. So kind of put some of that off to the side there. Now, floral foam, this is Oasis foam. This will, when you get it, it's going to be dry. And what you want to do is put it in a bucket of water or like a Rubbermaid bin and soak it for a while, at least an hour, half hour, something like that, so that it can soak. You can even leave it overnight. A lot of times we'll do that. We'll put some in the afternoon so that we'll have it ready for the next day. So this is already wet. So what I like to do is kind of work that in, at least for the center portion of my pots. Some people will go and do this in the entire container, and that actually is perfectly fine. What I like to do is use it for the center, which is where the majority of my stems are going to go. And then I put some of my soil around the perimeter here, which has already got a little moisture in it. And then when we're all done, we'll wet this good, and then when it freezes overnight, it'll just hold everything in place. So now I'm ready to start working on my pot. So I've got some noble fir branching here. These are just cut branches off of a noble fir tree. We're going to cut those and use those exactly to size, so that we'll be able to make this. So I'm not going to necessarily use this whole big branch as is. We're going to clip that up. Some Douglas fir, which has a much lighter green color, thinner, softer texture to it, nice little bit of glossiness to it, so it just gives you a little color and texture difference between the Douglas fir and the noble fir that I just showed you. For some accent and around the perimeter, we're going to use some incense cedar. So you can see it's got these little yellow kind of seed pods out at the end, and then this nice long, soft, drapey evergreen foliage. I really like to use this around the perimeter of the pot to kind of give it this little drape and texture, so we'll work with some of that. So that's the cedar incense. You can also use western red cedar, which looks very similar to this, just without the little yellow. This year I'm going to be using something new for me. It's a plant that I'm familiar with. This is called Skimmia. It's commonly used in the landscape industry in slightly warmer parts of the country. So it's not a tropical plant. It's not going to be way down south or anything, but like out on the coastal climates where it doesn't get quite as cold as it does here during the winter months, they use this in the landscape. So this should really hold up well because it's used to being outside in the cold. And so I wanted to try this just because I thought it would give a little bit of contrast in terms of texture. So with those nice big leaves, in the past I've used magnolia branches. I really like the way those look, but I just wanted to try something a little different here. So it's also got these little kind of flowers or seed heads in there just to give it another little bit of texture and interest. So we're going to start off with some spruce tops. So I've got 3 spruce tops here. I'm going to jam those in the center, and that's going to kind of form the basis for my pot, and then we're going to build from there. So let's get started. Before we start sticking these in, what I like to do is snip off some of these lower branches, because I want to put several inches of this spruce top into the floral foam or soil, whichever you have. And I want that to really stick in there good, so I don't want any side branching on there. You can save those cut ends because you can use those as filler. Now when you're designing a pot like this, you typically have 2 options. You can go kind of a 365-degree design, meaning you have something in the center and then full all the way around. Or if it's on your front porch, you can go taller in the back and kind of work your way towards the front. So this container here is typically viewed from the street, from the driveway as you're coming up our driveway. It's right here by the front sidewalk and the garage. So I'm actually going to orient these more towards the back and kind of slope it forward. So I'm going to kind of build it out from the back to the front. I believe this is my tallest spruce top here. So we're going to jam that right into that floral foam. So you can see I literally just shove it right into the floral foam. And then again, when this freezes, it's going to hold all of this stuff in place. Even if it doesn't freeze, the weight and the water and the foam, all of that's going to hold in place really nicely. All right, so might change those around a little bit, but that's going to kind of be the start of it for right now. And then from here, we're going to start fluffing this out with some of our other branches. So in fact, I think I'll probably cut some of these bigger side branches off. And we can just start shoving those right into the soil or the floral foam. So at the beginning, there really isn't any real rhyme or reason, at least in my mind, as to what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to fill this up with greenery. You want it to be as full as possible because, as you probably have figured out, this is unlike a summer container that you might have planted with flowers. This obviously is not going to grow, so you're not worrying about leaving space for plants to grow or fill out or anything like that. When I'm putting the greenery in, I like to sort of alternate which way the branches are facing. So in terms of the fir, noble fir, it sort of has a top and a bottom. Not all of them are like that, but I like to sort of alternate it as I'm going in here, just to give it a bit of color and texture difference. Again, it mostly is viewed from this direction. Even little pieces like this, you can just kind of jam those in around the edges. Bigger pieces, you can shove in from the side. Now I'm going to start to add some of the Douglas fir so that we get a different texture in there. I won't use quite as much Douglas fir as I did noble fir. But I think part of the beauty is having the different needle textures and different coloring. You want to make sure when you're working on a pot like this that you do work your way all the way around and don't just work from one side. Otherwise, your pot or your container will end up being one-sided. Now I'm going to start to work with this incense cedar here and start to work that in along some of these edges here. So as I mentioned, this is the Skimmia, and I thought that this would make a nice addition. Tip or trick, whenever you have leafy plants like this, eucalyptus, magnolia leaves, things like that, you can give these guys a fresh cut and stick them in a bucket of water for an hour or two before you're ready to use them, especially if it's warm enough. That'll give them the ability, just like fresh cut flowers, to pull up and hydrate their leaves at least a little bit more. We don't know exactly how long ago these were cut, so giving them a little bit of extra hydration before we put them into the container is always a good idea. Evergreens, because of their thin needle structure, are much more water efficient, so they don't dry out as fast as some of your leafy plants may, or broad-leafed evergreens like some of the magnolias, rhododendron leaves, boxwood, Oregonia, things like that. So sometimes I like to do that. It's just nice. Again, it just kind of breaks it up here. This larger leaf along with all the green needles in here, I think that adds a really nice texture to it to offer some color. So I'm going to use some artificial, I guess all ornaments are artificial, but these are specifically designed for outdoors. They're plastic, kind of a sort of matte finish on this on these ornaments. So we're gonna... One of my favorite things is winterberry. So these are some nice, fresh, real winterberry stems. Kind of work some of these in. And this year I thought I would try something a little bit different. I haven't done these before. These are actually just dried lotus pods. So kind of gives you that similar look and texture to a pine cone, but just something a little bit different. I think all we need now is maybe a bow for it, and we can call it a day. This is my winter container, and I'll just kind of run through each of the parts here again just so that you have this. So we've got fresh winterberry branches here. We have some dried lotus pods for a little bit of color and texture, that brown and the color and everything. I have noble fir in here. We have a leafy plant known as Skimmia in here with this little seed or flower in there, and the foliage. We have Douglas fir, which is a finer textured, technically not a true fir, little finer textured plant than the noble fir. We have our incense cedar, which has a real drapey nature to it. And it's got these little yellow seeds out on the tips. So that gives just a little different texture kind of hanging over the edges. I like the way that softens things. And then in the back, in the top here, I have these spruce tops. This is called white spruce. So the little white spruce tops. And that's the majority here. And then I just put in a couple of artificial ornaments. Of course, if your color scheme is different, you could use, we have glitter balls, we have different colored ornaments. So of course, if your color scheme is different, you can change things around. And so there's my winter container.